Welcome to worship this morning at Bart Centenary United Methodist Church. I'm Pastor Tammy, and I'm so glad you're here. Our first reading today comes from Psalm 86, verses 1 through 10 and 16 and 17. Hear the word of the Lord. Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am devoted to you. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Be gracious to me. O Lord, for to you do I cry all day long. Gladden the soul of your servant. For to you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call on you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my cry of supplication. In the day of my trouble, I call on you, for you will answer me. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and bow down before you. O Lord, you shall glorify your name, for you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant. Save the child of your serving girl. Show me a sign of your favor, so that those who hate me may see it and be put to shame, because you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Today, we continue to climb on the family tree, and the branches get a little bit gnarly. During those 25 years of waiting for God to provide the child of the promise, Abraham and Sarah made the same mistake that many of us make. They began to think, and then they decided to help God along. In Genesis 16, 1 through 6, we begin to see the trouble with helping God. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "You see that the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go in to my slave girl. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." This was her bright idea. She will get children through her slave girl. Now, before we judge Sarah too harshly by our own ideals, take note of this. The New International Commentary quotes 4 texts that suggest practices similar to the one Sarai offered Abram. As a matter of fact, one old Assyrian marriage contract included this instruction. If within 2 years she has not produced offspring for him, only she may buy a maidservant, and even later on. After she procures somehow an infant for him, she may sell her wherever she pleases. Is this a horrible use of another person? Yes. Was it fair? No. Is slavery in any form fair or good? No. And history has yet to record a single nation completely free of oppressive or unjust customs. But what we must know is that God never oppresses people. People oppress people, and society always finds a way to condone it. Now, back to our story. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to her husband, Abram, as a wife. He went to Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Hagar is now a wife. She has been elevated in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of her fellow slaves, and in the eyes of Abraham. By all the customs of the people in this area of the world at this time, she is the mother to the heir. Sarai is not pleased to know how her scheme has backfired on her, and she seeks to find blame somewhere other than herself. So she blames Abram. Then Sarai said to Abram, May the wrong done to me be on you. I give my slave girl to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. And the Lord will. God will not let Ishmael suffer for Sarah's decisions. And though he is not the child of the promise, not part of the covenant made between God and Abram, he is still a beloved child of God. And God does bless him and his mother, making a nation out of them also. Abram is not so benevolent or so wise. Indeed, Abram lets his flawed humanity show once again and bows to the customs of his time. In verse 6, we read, But Abram said to Sarai, Your slave girl is in your power. Do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she, Hagar, ran away from her. Now, on an interesting side note, Proverbs 30 points out the error in this thinking. In Proverbs 30, verses 21 to 23, we read, Under 3 things the earth trembles. Under 4 it cannot bear up. A slave when he becomes king, and a fool when glutted with food. An unloved woman when she gets a husband, and a maid when she succeeds her mistress. This was a situation bound for trouble from the start, as the story of Abram, Sarai, Hagar, and now Ishmael continues. We find out what happens when Hagar tries to run away from the situation she has been placed in by her mistress. As we pick up the story in verse 7, the angel of the Lord finds Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he says, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She says, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Return to your mistress and submit to her. What do you think the expression on Hagar's face was like when she heard this? Put yourself in her place. What would you have felt in this moment? If I were Hagar, I would have balked at this command. I can hear myself in her place, crying out, but she resents me for the situation she put me in. It's not fair. She does not treat me with the respect I deserve. This is when God sweetens her deal. The angel of the Lord prophesies over her and gives her her own promise. In verse 10, we read, The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Now you have conceived, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call him Ishmael. For the Lord has given heed to your affliction. Then the angel prophesies about her unborn child. Verse 12 we read, He shall be a wild donkey of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall live at odds with all his kin. Her son is destined to be wild and stubborn, but successful. This moves Hagar deeply, and she gives God a name. In verse 13 we read, So she named the Lord who spoke to her, You are El-roi. For she said, Have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? You see, it was understood by everyone that you could not live after seeing God. This understanding of God is explained more fully in Exodus 33, verses 20 to 23, when God was talking to Moses. Here God says, You cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live. And the Lord continued, See, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock, and while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. God cannot be seen, but God certainly does see this girl, this young woman who was not seen by others for her full worth, but God sees her. The literal translation of the phrase that is used here is, "Have I really seen the back of him who sees me?" And as Moses will someday in the future hear this explanation and see God's back, for this is who God is. God sees when no one else cares to look. God sees when we're mistreated. God sees when we cry into our pillow because we feel unloved. God sees beyond our sin and into the depth of our need. God sees when we are hiding. God sees when we are running. And God sees when we continue to sow the seed of His word, even in the floodplain of our own grief. Sometimes we don't realize that we've encountered God until our vision clears. And maybe that's what seeing His back means. So that is the backstory to today's text. It has been around 14 years since Hagar bore Abram a son. The situation between Sarai and Hagar is still one of tension and suspicion. And now Sarai has something that she did not have before, a son of her own, the son of the promise, who has lived through his infancy and is taking his next steps into boyhood, a miracle child. And Abram, now Abraham, loves both of his sons, but seems to have trouble navigating the relationship between their mothers. Today's text, Genesis 21, verses 8 through 21. The child, meaning Isaac, grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, Ishmael, whom she bore to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. Now let's stop here, because there's an undertone to this word, playing, in the Hebrew that we could easily miss in the English. The verb here, translated as playing, is not straightforward and simple. You see, sachach is a primitive root of to laugh, in merriment or scorn. It, by implication, talks about sporting, laughing, mocking, making fun of, or making sport of. Like many older brothers do, Ishmael was having fun at Isaac's expense, mocking or laughing at him, not with him. Understanding this does not make Sarah's actions that follow morally right, but it does bring a different flavor to our interpretations of Sarah's actions. So back to verse 10. So she, Sarah, said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac." Isaac, the son of the promise. Because of Sarah's impatience and her decision to help God along, now has an older brother. And as the firstborn, Ishmael can expect the rights of inheritance. Sarah won't have it. And who is left to deal with the fallout? Abraham. Let's look at verse 11. The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. You see, he laments this horrible place he's found himself in between the two mothers of his beloved sons and between the two sons. But in this situation, God speaks. In verse 12 we read, "But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you. For it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring." God gives Abraham reassurance. God will take care of Ishmael. He will even bless Ishmael and Hagar. Verse 14. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and he took bread and a skin of water, and he gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And for whatever reason, Abraham sends her away with not very much in the way of provisions, and they find themselves all too soon rather desperate. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she cast the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, a good way off, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, "Do not let me look on the death of the child." And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. She lifts up her voice to El Roi, the God who sees her, and she cries out. And God who sees her and also hears the cries of her son answers her. Let's pick up at verse 17. And God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy, hold him fast with your hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and she filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God takes care of their immediate needs and plans a future of blessing for them. Picking it back up in verse 20, we read, God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What a story. What a sordid tale. But we don't have to shake too many branches on any family tree in order to find some bad decisions that cause difficulty for not only the people who made them, but for others as well. Families are messy because they're made up of humans with human failings. They sometimes are not what we would hope them to be or what God would have them be. What we learn about God in this text is that God sees us, not just the mess we're in, but us, regardless of the situations that others place us in or that we put ourselves in. God hears when we cry out for help, and God blesses us, bringing good out of the messes that humans make. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is also the God of Ishmael. The God who blesses Hagar also blesses Sarah. God's love and grace come to us despite our actions, not because of them. Today, on Father's Day, we remember this story of a father who loved both of his sons. He was not perfect, but he placed both of his sons in the hands of God, and God blessed them both. As you remember and honor your father, or those who have acted in the role of father in your life today, or as you lament the father you have lost, or the father that you never had, receive this blessing from our shared divine Father. From Jeremiah 31:33. This is the covenant that I make with you. I will put my law within you, and I will write it on your heart, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Friends, we are the people of God, and God, our Father, loves us. May our Father's name be praised. Amen.